I was on a plane back home after a business trip, thinking about a peaceful evening with my family. Nothing fancy, mind you, just the simple pleasure of walking through my own front door, hanging up my coat, maybe pouring myself a glass of whiskey while Margaret asked me about my trip. That's all I wanted. After 3 days of meetings, handshakes with people I barely knew, and sleeping in hotel beds that were never quite right, I just wanted home. I wanted normal. I wanted the life I'd spent 4 decades building. You can please tell me your name, the city you're watching from, and subscribe to this channel. It means a lot to me. But life has a funny way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. And I mean funny in the way that makes you question everything you thought was solid, everything you believed was real. The kind of funny that keeps you awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering how you miss the signs. The flight got canceled. Weather, they said. Some storm system moving through the Midwest that grounded half the planes in the country. I sat in that airport terminal for 2 hours, watching the departure board, watching my flight time get pushed back again and again, until finally they just canceled it altogether. I could have stayed another night, could have gotten a hotel room near the airport, and tried again in the morning. But something told me to rent a car and drive. It was only 4 hours. I'd be home by midnight if I left right away. So I quietly made my way home, not expecting anything out of the ordinary. The roads were empty at that hour, just me and the occasional trucker hauling their load to the darkness. I had time to think during that drive. Too much time, maybe. I thought about the business deal I just closed, about retirement looming on the horizon, about whether Margaret and I should finally take that trip to Italy we've been talking about for years. Normal thoughts, comfortable thoughts. The thoughts of a man who believed he knew exactly what was waiting for him at home. But what I saw when I pulled into the driveway stopped me in my tracks. The house was blazing with light. Every window glowed like we were hosting some kind of celebration. I could hear music thumping from inside, that bass-heavy stuff the kids listen to these days. My first thought was that maybe Margaret had invited some friends over. Maybe the neighbors were having a get-together. But it was past 11 o'clock on a Wednesday night. Nothing about it made sense. And then I saw her. As I walked to the garden gate, I saw her, my wife, sitting by the doghouse, crying. It was the last thing I expected. Margaret wasn't a crier. In 40 years of marriage, I could count on one hand the number of times I'd seen her truly break down. When her mother died, yes, when our youngest, Tommy, had that accident on his motorcycle, and we thought we might lose him, absolutely. But those were moments of crisis, moments of genuine tragedy. This was a Wednesday night. This was supposed to be ordinary. She was hunched over, her shoulders shaking in that way that told me these weren't just tears. This was grief. This was something that had broken through all her defenses and shattered her from the inside out. She never showed emotion like that. Never. Margaret was a strong one. The rock, the person everyone in the family turned to when things got hard. She was the one who held it together, who kept her composure even when the world was falling apart around her. Seeing her like this, crumpled and vulnerable by the doghouse where our old Labrador Max used to sleep before he passed last spring, it sent ice through my veins. I called out to her, but she didn't respond. My voice seemed to disappear into the night air, swallowed by the music and laughter coming from inside the house. Or maybe she heard me and just couldn't bring herself to answer. Maybe whatever had driven her to that spot had also stolen her voice, left her incapable of doing anything but sitting there in her pain. The doghouse. Why the doghouse? We'd built it together 15 years ago, back when Max was just a puppy. Tommy had helped, and our daughter Sarah had painted the little sign that still hung crooked above the entrance. Max's castle. It had been a happy project, a weekend of laughter and teamwork. But now it stood empty, a relic of simpler times, and my wife sat beside it like she was mourning more than just an old dog. What was going on? Why was she sitting there alone? The questions hammered at me as I stood there in the driveway, my rental car still running behind me, my suitcase forgotten in the trunk. The tension in the air was thick enough to choke on. I could feel it pressing down on me, this weight of something terribly wrong, something I didn't understand. It didn't make sense. None of it made sense. The party inside, the crying outside. The disconnect was jarring, like two different realities had somehow collided in my front yard. And the story that unfolded next would change everything I knew about my family. I felt not form in my stomach as I approached her. Each step felt heavy, like I was walking through mud. Part of me didn't want to reach her, didn't want to hear whatever it was that had reduced her to this state. Because once I knew, I couldn't unknow it. Once she told me, whatever comfortable illusion I'd been living under would shatter completely. I could hear the sound of laughter and music coming from inside the house more clearly now. Young voices, probably a dozen or more. The kids, they were throwing a party. My kids were inside, partying like nothing was wrong, while their mother was outside, in tears. Sarah was 28 now, married, with a good job at a marketing firm downtown. Tommy was 25, still finding his way but working steady at a construction company. They were adults, capable of making their own decisions. But having a party at their parents' house while their father was out of town, while their mother sat outside crying, what kind of adults did that? I wanted to go inside, but I had to understand what had happened to her first. The music pulsed through the walls of the house. Some modern song I didn't recognize. All electronic beats and synthesized vocals. It felt obscene somehow, that soundtrack of celebration playing behind this moment of such obvious anguish. The silence between us felt like a lifetime. I stood there, maybe 5 feet away from her, and the distance felt impossible to cross. What do you say? How do you reach someone who's been broken by something you can't see, can't understand? Finally, I moved. I walked those last few steps and lowered myself down beside her, my old knees creaking in protest. The grass was damp with evening dew. I could smell it, that fresher smell mixed with the lingering scent of Margaret's perfume, that same one she'd worn for 20 years. I sat next to her, hoping she'd say something, but she remained silent. Her hands were clasped in her lap, her knuckles white from gripping so hard. Her face was turned away from me, toward the doghouse, toward Max's empty castle. Tears ran down her cheeks in steady streams, catching the light from the house. What had caused this? Was it something I had missed? Something deeper than just a bad day? The questions circled in my mind like vultures. Had I been blind to something? In my focus on work, on providing, on building the life I thought we all wanted, had I missed seeing that something was rotting at the foundation? She wouldn't speak, but her face, her eyes told me everything I needed to know. When she finally turned to look at me, those eyes, the same hazel eyes I'd fallen in love with 40 years ago, were hollow, haunted. They held a pain so deep I could feel it radiating from her like heat from a fire. This wasn't about me being gone for 3 days. This wasn't about a forgotten anniversary or a missed phone call. This was something that had been building for a long time, something that had finally reached a breaking point, and I had been too wrapped up in my own world to see it coming. There was something happening here, something I didn't see coming, and I wasn't ready for it. But the truth was, you're never ready for the moment your life splits into before and after. You're never ready for the conversation that changes everything. Margaret, I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. Talk to me, please. She drew in a shaking breath, and I watched her struggle to form words. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. It was like watching someone try to speak a language they'd forgotten. But before I could put the pieces together, everything I thought I knew started to crumble. Because when she finally spoke, her voice raw and broken, what came out wasn't what I expected. It never is it? They don't even know I'm out here, she said, and there was such defeat in those words, such resignation. They don't even care. The music from the house seemed to get louder, as if mocking us. I could hear someone shrieking with laughter, could hear the clink of glasses, the sounds of people having a good time. My children, their friends, people who should have noticed that the woman who raised them, who sacrificed everything for them, was sitting outside in the dark, crying her heart out. How long have you been out here? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. Since about 8, she said, wiping at her face with the back of her hand. I was making dinner. I'd made pot roast, the way Tommy likes it. I thought maybe we'd all sit down together, have a family meal. But then his friends started showing up, and then Sarah's friends. And suddenly the house was full of people I didn't know, people who barely acknowledged I existed. 3 hours. She'd been sitting out here for 3 hours while our children partied inside the house we'd given them, the home we'd built for them. I tried to talk to them, she continued, her voice gaining a slight edge now, anger mixing with the hurt. I asked them to keep the noise down. I asked them to clean up after themselves. I asked them to maybe respect the fact that this is our home, not some fraternity house. And you know what Sarah said to me? I didn't want to know, but I had to hear it. She said, "Mom, you need to chill. Dad's not even here, so why does it matter?" Like the only reason to respect this house, to respect me, was because you might come home and disapprove. Like I'm nothing. Like I don't matter unless you're here to enforce it. Each word was a knife. I felt them cutting into me, into the image I had of my family, into the story I'd been telling myself about the kind of father I was, the kind of children I'd raised. And Tommy? I had to ask, even though I already knew the answer would hurt just as much. Tommy laughed, she said, and her voice broke on that word. He laughed and told his friends I was being dramatic. Then he turned up the music. I'm about to tell you exactly what happened when I walked into that house. But even now, thinking back on it, I can barely believe it myself. What I discovered, the truth that came out, it changed everything. It's a story of betrayal, hidden truths, and a family on the edge. But it's also a story about something deeper, something that had been festering beneath the surface of our seemingly perfect family for years. You see, I had been so focused on being a provider, on making sure we had money in the bank and food on the table, that I'd missed the more important questions. I'd missed asking whether my children respected their mother. I'd missed seeing that somewhere along the way, we'd raised entitled, thoughtless adults who treated the woman who gave them life like an inconvenient servant. But there was more to it than that. There always is, isn't there? There's something else, Margaret said, and now her voice was different. Harder, like she'd made a decision about something. Something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you a long time ago. My heart was pounding now. The night air felt cold suddenly, too cold for late spring. What is it? She turned to face me fully then, and in the light spilling from the house, I could see every line on her face, every year of our life together etched into her skin. Beautiful, still. Even now, even like this. I've been keeping this family together with duct tape and prayer for 5 years, she said. Ever since Sarah got married and moved back into the neighborhood. Ever since Tommy quit college and decided he'd rather coast through life doing the bare minimum. I've been the one they call when they need money. I've been the one they dump their problems on. I've been the one who babysits Sarah's kids every weekend so she and Mark can go out, who helped Tommy pay his rent last month when he spent his paycheck on a new gaming system. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, though the answer was already forming in my mind. Because I hadn't been there. Not really. I'd been present physically, but mentally, emotionally, I'd been checked out, focused on work, on my own concerns. Because you were always working, she said, confirming my fears. And when you weren't working, you were tired from working. And I didn't want to burden you. I didn't want to be another problem for you to solve. So I handled it. I handled everything. Until I couldn't handle it anymore. The weight of that admission hung between us. 40 years of marriage, and I'd somehow let it come to this. Let my wife carry the burden of our adult children's dysfunction, while I remained blissfully ignorant. Tonight was supposed to be different, she continued. I decided that when you got home tomorrow, I was going to tell you everything. I was going to say that we needed to set boundaries with the kids, that we needed to stop enabling them, that we needed to get our life back. Just us. The way it used to be before we became the bank and the babysitter and the dumping ground for everyone else's problems. And then I prompted, because clearly there was more. And then I found out about the party. Sarah texted me this afternoon asking if they could have a few friends over tonight. Just a small thing, she said. 12 people. Tops. I said no. I said your father is coming home tomorrow, and I want the house clean and peaceful. I said no. For once in my life, I said no. But they did it anyway. I finished for her. They did it anyway. They waited until what they thought was late enough that I'd gone to bed, and they invited everyone over anyway. Because my no doesn't mean anything. Because I don't mean anything. That was the moment I understood. This wasn't just about a party. This was about years of disrespect, years of being taken for granted, years of sacrifice that went unacknowledged and unappreciated. This was about a woman who had given everything to her family and found herself sitting alone in the dark while that family celebrated without her. I came out here to Max's old house because this is where I feel closest to something that actually loved me unconditionally, she said, and those words destroyed me. That dog never asked me for money, never called me dramatic, never laughed at me when I was hurting. He just loved me, simple as that. I reached for her hand then, and she let me take it. Her fingers were cold. "I'm sorry," I said, knowing the words were inadequate, but needing to say them anyway. "I'm so sorry, Margaret. I should have seen this. I should have been here." "Yes," she said simply. "You should have." We sat there for another moment. The music still pounding from the house, the laughter still ringing out. And then something shifted in me. Something that had been dormant for too long woke up. I stood up, my knees protesting again, and I reached down to help Margaret to her feet. She looked at me questioningly. "Come on," I said. "We're going to set this right. Right now. Tonight." We walked to the house together, her hand in mine. With each step, I felt my anger building. Not the explosive kind, not the type that leads to yelling and broken dishes. This was colder, more controlled. This was the anger of a man who'd finally seen the truth and wasn't going to let it stand. I opened the front door, and the noise hit us like a wall. There must have been 30 people crammed into our living room and kitchen. Red plastic cups everywhere. The furniture pushed back against the walls. The carpet already stained with God knows what. And right in the middle of it all, holding court like they owned the place, were Sarah and Tommy. Sarah saw me first. Her face went white. "Dad, you're home early." "Out," I said. The single word cut through the noise, and the music stopped. Someone had the presence of mind to turn it off. "Dad, let me explain." Tommy started, but I held up my hand. I said out, "Everyone who doesn't live here, you have 5 minutes to leave. Now." There was a frozen moment where nobody moved, like they were waiting to see if I was serious. I walked to the sound system and unplugged it completely. "Now," I said, louder this time, and the spell broke. People started scrambling for coats and bags, mumbling apologies, avoiding eye contact. Within minutes, the house was empty except the 4 of us. Me, Margaret, Sarah, and Tommy. Sarah found her voice first. "Dad, you're being completely unreasonable. We're adults. We can have friends over if we want to." "In your own house, yes," I said calmly. "In your mother's house? No, not without permission. Not after she explicitly told you no." "Mom's being dramatic about this whole thing," Tommy said, and I saw Margaret flinch at hearing those words confirmed. I turned to my son, this 25-year-old man-child who thought he could disrespect a woman who raised him. "Your mother has been out in the garden crying for 3 hours. She's been crying because her children, the people she sacrificed everything for, treated her like she doesn't matter. So let me be very clear about something. This ends tonight." "What ends?" Sarah asked, defensive now. "All of it," I said. "The disrespect, the entitlement, the using this house like it's your personal crash pad, the treating your mother like she's your servant. All of it ends right now." I looked at both of them, these children I loved but had clearly failed in some fundamental way. "You're going to apologize to your mother. Really apologize, not just say the words to get me off your back. And then you're going to clean this house until it sparkles. Every cup, every stain, every piece of furniture back where it belongs. And while you're doing that, you're going to think about how you got here, to a place where you thought this was acceptable." "Dad." Sarah tried again, but I wasn't finished. "And tomorrow, we're all going to sit down and have a conversation about boundaries and respect and what it means to be a family. Because clearly, somewhere along the way, we forgot." I turned to Margaret, who had tears streaming down her face again, but these were different. These weren't tears of hopelessness. These were something else. "And you and I said to my wife, "are going to go upstairs, pack a bag, and get a hotel room for the night. Let them clean up their mess without us here. But, Tommy started. No buts, I said. You wanted to act like this was your house? Fine. You can take care of it like it's your house. Clean it, lock it up, and leave the keys on the kitchen counter when you're done, because you won't be coming back here without an invitation. Not anymore. I could see the reality of the situation finally dawning on them. This wasn't just about tonight. This was about everything changing. Sarah's defiance crumbled first. Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't think. No, Margaret said, her voice stronger now than it had been all night. You didn't think. You didn't think about anyone but yourself. She turned to Tommy. Both of you. You've been taking and taking and taking, and I let you because I'm your mother and I love you. But your father's right. This has to change. We left them there, standing in the wreckage of their party, finally understanding that actions have consequences. I took Margaret upstairs, helped her pack a bag, and we drove to a hotel on the edge of town. A nice one, the kind with room service and those fluffy robes. As we sat on the hotel bed, both of us exhausted, Margaret leaned her head on my shoulder. Thank you, she said softly. I should have done it sooner, I replied. I should have seen what was happening. We both should have, she said. We raised them to think the world revolves around them. We gave them everything they wanted instead of teaching them what they needed to know. She was right, of course. In our desire to give our children better lives than we had, we'd forgotten to teach them gratitude, respect, responsibility. We'd made their lives so easy that they'd never learned to struggle, never learned to appreciate what they had. But we can fix this, I said. It's not too late. No, she agreed. It's not too late, but it's going to be hard. They're not going to like the new rules. They don't have to like them, I said. They just have to follow them. This is about respect, not popularity. We fell asleep that night, holding each other, really holding each other, for the first time in months, maybe years. And I made a promise to myself and to her that things would be different from now on. The next morning, we returned home to find the house spotless. Every cup had been washed and put away. Every surface had been cleaned. The furniture was back in place. And on the kitchen counter, as requested, were 2 sets of keys. Beside them was a note. I picked it up and read it aloud to Margaret. It was from Sarah. Mom and Dad, we've been up all night cleaning and talking. Really talking, maybe for the first time in years. You were right about everything. We've been selfish and entitled, and we took you for granted, especially you, Mom. We're sorry. We know sorry isn't enough, but it's a start. We'll call later to see if you're willing to talk. We love you both. Sarah and Tommy. Margaret read the note over my shoulder, and I felt her breath hitch. You think they mean it? She asked. I don't know. I said honestly, but we're going to find out. The weeks that followed weren't easy. We did have that conversation, the one about boundaries and respect. It was uncomfortable. There were tears. There were raised voices. But there was also honesty, maybe the first real honesty we'd had as a family in a long time. We set new rules. No more unlimited access to our home. No more financial bailouts without a plan for repayment. No more dumping their responsibilities on their mother while they live their lives. And most importantly, no more taking either of us for granted. Sarah and Tommy didn't like it at first. Sarah complained that we were being too harsh. Tommy tried to argue that we were treating them like children, but we held firm. This wasn't about punishment. This was about teaching them what we should have taught them years ago. Slowly, things began to change. Sarah started calling more often, but not to ask for favors, just to talk, to check in, to see how we were doing. Tommy got a better job, started paying his own bills, started showing up for family dinners on time instead of hours late. And Margaret, the woman I found crying by the doghouse that night, she started smiling again, really smiling. She joined a book club. She started taking painting classes. She'd always wanted to try. She stopped being everyone else's solution and started being her own person again. As for me, I cut back on work. I started coming home earlier, being more present, really listening when Margaret talked instead of just hearing words. I realized that all those years of providing financially, I'd forgotten to provide emotionally. I'd forgotten that my family needed me, not just my paycheck. That night by the Doghouse was a turning point. It was the moment our family either fell apart or found a way to rebuild on a stronger foundation. We chose to rebuild. It wasn't easy. Some days, it still isn't easy. But it's real now. It's honest. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, I'll find Margaret sitting out by Max's old doghouse. But she's not crying anymore. She's just sitting, remembering maybe or planning for tomorrow. And when I join her there, when I sit beside her in the grass, she takes my hand and smiles. That's when I know we made the right choice. That's when I know that sometimes the worst moments in life are really just doorways to something better, if we're brave enough to walk through them. Because that night, when I saw my wife cry by the doghouse while my kids partied inside, I was given a choice. I could ignore it, pretend everything was fine, go back to the comfortable lie we'd all been living. Or I could face the truth, as painful as it was, and fight for something better. I chose the truth. We both did. And it saved us. It saved our marriage. And maybe, just maybe, it saved our children too, by teaching them that love isn't just about giving people everything they want. Sometimes love means saying no. Sometimes love means letting people face the consequences of their actions. Sometimes love means standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. That's what I learned that night. That's what Margaret taught me. Sitting there in the dark by an empty doghouse, crying tears that should have been shed years earlier. She taught me that silence isn't always golden, that keeping the peace isn't the same as keeping the family together, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit that something is broken and needs to be fixed. We fixed it. We're still fixing it. And we'll keep fixing it for as long as it takes. Because that's what real families do. They don't pretend everything is perfect. They face the imperfections, the flaws, the hard truths. They sit in the uncomfortable silence. They have the difficult conversations. They set the boundaries. They do the work. And in the end, they come out stronger for it. That's my story. That's what happened tonight. I came home early and found my wife crying by the doghouse while my kids partied inside. It's not a pretty story. It's not a comfortable story. But it's a true story. And truth, I've learned, is worth more than comfort any day of the week. If you want to find out what happened, hit that like button, subscribe, and comment below telling me where you're watching from. Trust me, you won't want to miss the shocking reveal coming up. Stay tuned, and let's dive into the full story.